Good afternoon, everyone. This is Senate President Niederhauser. We are in our media briefing and access from our public through the internet. Welcome to all those who are watching or listening. We have Senator Maine here to represent our Democratic Party. And we try and have a balance of discussion here in our press availability. And let's see, what happened on the floor today? Anything particular other than we had some celebration. It's Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to everybody. And let's start with media questions. Any questions?
Yes, Senator Adams, I was wondering if you could update us on the status of SB 196. I saw that it was removed from the committee agenda yesterday morning.
Sure. We're actually trying to get back on the committee agenda either Thursday or Monday. Again, the idea behind Senate Bill 196 is to try to make sure our statutes are in compliance with some of the recent Supreme Court rulings, and in addition to make sure that we try to sustain our long-held sex education laws regarding abstinence and fidelity after marriage. So hopefully by removing that phrase, we again do both.
Is there an eye toward the Equality Utah lawsuit as well in the preparation for that bill?
Well, I think without question, the reason we're looking at this is because Equality Utah has brought up the issue. I don't really love the fact that courts have the opportunity to legislate. I actually believe that we need to do that job. And if there's a problem with our statute, I believe we need to have the opportunity to fix it, because I don't think that's just our right. I think it's our obligation to do that. So I prefer this over litigation any day. I think it's something we should do, and I would have preferred them to come to us and talk to us before they filed the litigation.
In a nutshell, what does your bill do?
Just removes the word homosexuality, advocacy, restricts that phrase, so pretty simple.
So it would remove it so that teachers can discuss this?
No, it actually moves it so that they can discuss abstinence and fidelity. And that's all that we allowed anyway, so it really doesn't do a whole lot, except it does remove that and make our statute more compliant with what we feel is probably the court rulings.
Is it enough to, do you think, to sandbag that lawsuit?
You know, I'm not an attorney and wouldn't want to speak for any of our good legal counsel. Probably ask them, ask Equality Utah. That's probably beyond what I probably ought to comment on.
When you talk about fidelity after marriage, you're talking about all types of marriage that
Yes.
would be taught. Fidelity in a same-sex marriage
Yeah,
as well as...
I think I remember a Supreme Court ruling.
Sandbagging the lawsuit. That's the first time I've ever heard sandbagging the lawsuit. The same
That is a good
phrase.
phrase. I wish I'd have thought of that.
Sandbagging is usually what legislators do.
I wanted to ask Senator Stevenson about the budget. What's the status of things? And I mean, you know, where you guys have made reference to this not being necessarily the best budget year, and so what's it looking like right now?
Well, I mean, it's looking like this is definitely not the best budget year. There is, we've got probably, on a per capita basis across the state, we have less money to deal with than we did in 2011. What that really means is that, you know, we've worked very hard, I think, as a legislature to make education whole through from 2011 until now. We certainly had some dips prior to that. But, and we'll work hard to do that again this year. The only priorities that we've seen turned in to date, I think, are social services, education, and higher ed. I haven't seen any of the others. And I will compliment the committees. They've been very, very positive in the way they've gone about this, and they've done a great job of prioritizing their committees as they've put their appropriations together. So we'll see how far down those lists we can get as we start putting together, as executive approach starts putting together the lists.
What
can be funded?
Any ideas of what is going to get funded? I mean, you talked about social services, homeless funding. Are they going to get their money?
That will be, you're probably, stay tuned. We're 2 weeks away on that, I'm sure. Maybe 3.
Are you going to have the new revenue numbers by the end of the week? Is that the plan?
The revenue will be out by the end of the week. I think that the regular day would be tomorrow, but I'm not sure they'll be ready tomorrow, probably Thursday.
You've talked before about your expectation for those revenue numbers being more or less flat. Is that still your thought?
That's still the expectation.
What is the detriment? I mean, because we've heard, I guess, unemployment's down, wages are up, income tax collections are up, sales tax, I guess is.
Sales tax is off considerably.
Is commercial tax still down? Because I know it was.
Income tax, until we see the new numbers, we're not sure what income tax is going to bring. There was some anticipation 2 weeks ago that we may see some declines in sales tax, continued declines, and maybe some increase in income tax, but we were talking like they were almost going to offset each other, so.
Why is sales tax off considerably?
Well, first of all, we think the number is somewhere maybe as high as 200 million in offline or online sales that we're faced with. People are just, their habits are changing. People buy different than they used to, and that sales tax law has been in place a long while and served us well. But we're looking at some real declines in the way people purchase. And I heard a really wise man explain it to me the other day. If your kids are in college and they don't want to buy a car, they want to take a trip to some far off place. Instead, with that money, there's no sales tax involved in that purchase. And that's happening more and more with what we're doing.
Will the new revenue estimates reflect the money coming in from Amazon.com? You say you use that $200 million figure, but that was before the Amazon deal, right?
The Amazon deal, we don't really know what that is, and I think there's a real reluctance to spend that money until we know how much we have. So you may not, and we may not know that until July.
So it would just show up as
And
surplus?
the same thing with the Volkswagen settlement. We don't know what that is, and then we're going to be very reluctant to spend any of it.
But will be available for our next budget.
Whether,
So, great.
I thought
Any other
I thought-
budget
I thought
questions?
the Volkswagen thing was pretty well set. I thought it was about 32 million.
well, it very well could be, but until you have the check in your hand, it's probably best not to spend the money.
That's not the way I work. It's not going to get into the budget.
That's not the way government usually works either.
That's why Senator or President Niederhauser appointed me here. Don't spend it until you have it.
In the discussion about education funding, there was talk, I think, about maybe revisiting sales tax exemptions. What is the level of sales tax exemptions right now, and what do you see in terms of expanding those?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough question. I mean, we exempt a lot of sales tax out, and we exempt a lot of our income tax out. The income tax would go directly to directly to education. But exemptions, that's what's really happened the last few years. We've exempted income tax, and as we've pushed that in the bottom of the budget. We've supplanted it with our sales tax dollars. And so now we're seeing that we're really creating a compression here. That's why we're having trouble with money this year. That's part of it. Excuse me. President Niederhauser has explained many times that this may be the new normal we're looking at. This may not be an absolute exception. Hopefully it's the bottom. We do see an incline next year, but I don't see why we would have a big increase next year unless there's like a tremendous stock sell-off or something could give us some money. My opinion, I haven't confirmed this with anyone, but I think people are hanging on to their money to see what's going to happen with what the president's going to do with capital gains. We saw a big sell-off 2 years ago because we thought President Obama was going to raise capital gains, so people sold stocks, and that made a big difference. This year, I'm not sure, we're not looking at a reverse of that as part of the problem we're having, why we're not seeing the increase.
There's still time, though, to make some changes with those exemptions or make some other changes to tax policy. We've talked.
There is time,
a number of
and
times.
you might be surprised. We might come out with something.
How about a little hint what that might be?
It will be a surprise.
Or it might be we do end up doing nothing. We're actually working on some things. I think that a big effort towards identifying some of these tax credits, exemptions, it's very difficult on the fly for us to get into the details of those, and probably is best for an interim study, which I think we're going to have our Revenue and Taxation Committee have a real deep look at all those exemptions and come back with some recommendations.
No Valentine's surprise.
So it sounds like then, as we've talked repeatedly about what you might do in response to the initiative in terms of changing the tax structure to come with more money for schools, it sounds like that would be put off until interim, when you can take a more thorough look at all the exemptions. We won't see a tax increase or a tax change this session.
Well,
Does that make sense?
tax increase, I think, maybe something like we did 2 years ago. You know, where we raised the gas tax. I'm not saying we're raising the gas tax, but something more incremental. 750 million. I'm going to say, that's not going to happen this session. It's just politically impossible for our legislature to do that unless we're hearing from our constituents that this is the absolute best thing that and most important thing that they want us to deal with, and we're not hearing that. And so politically, it's impossible for a legislature to do that, an elected body. But we are looking at restructuring, creating more of a broad-based, lower rate type of infrastructure or tax structure that would actually generate more revenue just because it's in a better structural situation. And when you're able to broaden the base, either through getting rid of exemptions or what do we call those here just a minute ago? When you get rid of credits, you broaden the base, and if you can lower the rate, that actually sparks more economic activity, creates a greater increase, a greater revenue. So those are some things we're looking at, but there wouldn't be a lot of revenue increasing in those other than by virtue of the pure economics of broadening the base and lowering the rate. And then we're going to take on this issue with our exemptions and credits during the interim.
What about, you say something incremental, one of the other issues that I know is near and dear to the Senate is restoring the state sales tax on food. Is that still on the table as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, that's a broadening of the base and potentially a lowering of the rate. And so that is on the table. It's something that we're discussing. And then I've now forgotten what else I was going to say about that.
Well, let me just follow up. You say that that would be broadening the base and lowering the rate. So would that be something that you would want to deal with this session, or would that be put into that interim study to look at all kinds of exemptions?
It's difficult for us to deal with some of these large policy changes at this point in the session, but it's something we're discussing, and I'd say it's still a possibility. How probable it is, that's up for debate. And we're not closing the door on anything and saying we're just going to deal with it next year. We're not, if that's the question, we're not closing any of those doors at this point. We're still working on it.
Every day makes it less probable. It's not impossible.
May I just ask, what would be different about the House this session on restoring the sales tax on food? That's always been the impediment to that, right? Are they more willing?
The initiative. I know that's big discussion. There's some concern with many legislators, and I think that's changed the whole dynamic of discussing this issue. Without the initiative, I think it would have no chance like it's had in the past. So, but I think there's some possibilities that we haven't had before, and And I think it's driven by there being the initiative looming out there.
But you spoke about politically popular things. I mean, how do you think that's going to go over if you try to propose a food tax or restoring the food tax?
Well, I know that there's some difficulties with that, but if it's combined maybe with the lowering of the rate, maybe that's palatable enough for some people. And would give us the political environment for us to, act.
Do you know what the mechanics of that are? How much the rate would need to be lowered? How much money we're talking about at this point?
It's all a matter of discussion at this point, and there isn't anything firm or solid.
Got a couple of questions from our viewers, it looks like.
Yeah.
President.
One of our viewer asked, who will the new tax structure affect the most? Why shouldn't the wealthier portion of Utah bear the infrastructure burden if it's been avoided for so long?
Well, our income structure right now is progressive. If you make a lot of money, you don't get any deductions. You pay 5%. But if you make below probably $150,000 adjusted gross income, you start to get deductions that those of higher income don't. So we already have that structure here in the state. And with income tax specifically, it's a driver of jobs and employment. And if you increase your marginal tax rates with income tax, you tax more of something, you get less of it. You tax less of something, you get more of it. And it's an economic driver, and that's why we resist raising the rate to the income tax. Other questions?
Could the food tax be imposed strictly on so-called junk foods which affect the health of Utahns?
Yes, it could, but I think that the legislature would resist that. If we were going to broaden the base, we wouldn't do it with just junk food. It would just be a restoration of the tax on food. If we go down that road, I'm not saying we are, but that's a possibility, and we're at least at this point in discussions of broadening the base. So I don't think that would be an option. But thank you for offering that.
It may be a fun discussion is what is junk food?
I eat healthy potato chips.
For some of us.
Low salt, low
We'd
fat.
have to maybe define that.
Anything from our rules? Yeah.
That's right.
You got some statistics for us?
Well,
Senator
we've got
Henderson?
621 bills that have been numbered and are out there circulating, and 57 bills have passed the legislature. So we've got still a big mountain to climb. So.
And today's halfway, but who's counting?
Senator Maine, anything from your caucus you'd like to talk about today?
Two things that just came to mind. I think that I survey my district often, and the last survey that came back to me is online tax. I think, and it was like 76%. I think that they know.
In favor?
In favor. I think that they know it's coming, and really we've had a free ride for a long time, and we've all taken advantage of that. And so I think that if we do put that in place, I think people know that it's harmful to brick and mortar, and I think it'll be even Steven for our retail stores and our online stores. And I think with the Amazon and that progress we made there, I think people realize it's coming. And I think they should, it's a fair thing, I think.
But is this a function that the state legislature should be addressing, or is this something that you're having to do cleanup work for Congress?
I think you've been here long enough, we can do whatever. It doesn't mean it's, we don't have to revisit it, but we have the authority to do a lot of things. And a lot of things have been revisited. And I think that a step forward is a step forward for us. And we obviously need the revenue. We have a high population. We have a high population of younger people, and they're online users.
Senator Maine, have you talked to your, or spoken with your constituents about restoring the sales tax on food and how they feel about that?
I think they know it's a fair tax when everybody pays it, but I think we have to be really careful about what we do. Because wages in our state, I don't think they aren't where I think they should be, and I think it's kind of stagnant wages for a lot of people. And everyone needs to eat, even though everybody pays the same tax, everyone needs to eat too. And we want healthy eating, and so I think conversation needs to be there, as conversation needs to be in everything that we're going to do to raise revenue and to be fair. And I think that it'll be in the conversation. But it's tender because my Senate district, it's middle class America, and we love it that way, but everybody works hard, and so I think I don't think it would be their first choice.
Would you support a food tax?
I would support an online tax before a food tax.
All right, we'll take one other question. Any others we have today?
As long as they didn't tax Twinkies.
So you'd support a junk food?
Yeah, I knew.
Well, you know,
an exemption.
I'm a
Exemption.
hostess gal.
I'm sure there's nutritional value in it.
I don't think any, but it's in my.
There is some, but very little.
Look at my desk. I got Twinkies there.
That's how we survive the session, how we stay healthy and strong.
President, we talked a lot about the sales tax on food. Is there anything else that is at that level of interest that we should include in any kind of discussion?
We've talked about freezing the basic rate. We've talked about doing another incremental increase in gas tax and releasing some of the transportation earmarks in the general fund, and now providing that for education. So those are some other ideas that are being batted around.
Senator Adams, you were the sponsor of that earmark on transportation. Is that something you see happening?
Not right away, I don't think. So I do think, that's served us well. If you look at it, it's actually a rainy day, working rainy day fund. And we pulled out of that when our economy's turned down. So I don't think we're in a recession yet. I hope we don't go, but I hope it stays.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.